Hello everyone, this is Nilesh here once again. In the last session, we talked about .NET Core. The .NET Core is modern .NET platform designed for multiple operating system, Windows, Linux, and Mac. And it is an open source platform evolving rapidly. We've seen that .NET Core architecture is quite similar to the traditional .NET Framework architecture. And we also learn how to implement Hello World application for the .NET Core using Visual Studio and also directly from the command line. We understood the detailed execution flow of the .NET Core application. Now that we are ready with the .NET Framework and .NET Core understanding, it's time to learn the C# as a programming language. And C# is really feature-rich programming language. There are so many features of C# language. Many of them are similar to other object-oriented languages like Java and C++. And there are also few unique new features in the C# language. The most importantly, we talk about C# is object-oriented language. Like any other object-oriented language, the class and object is central concept of C#. While discussing about the .NET CTS, Common Type System, we learn that there are two categories. One is value type and there is reference types. The value type variable represent or stores the values, while reference type variables stores the reference, stores the address of the objects. And if you recall, the class was a reference type. Of course, in this entire session, we will keep discussing about class and object. If you already aware of C++ or Java, you might find this particular discussion quite similar. However, I thought of going to some basics, and it is worth having a quick understanding why at all this notion of the class and object came up. We will also talk about the different types of functions in the class, like constructors, destructor, getter setters, properties, facilitators, and so many things to discuss. I'm sure this particular session will be one of the big sessions. So, to begin with, let us consider one problem. What if I want to store information about a person and I want to do certain operations on that information? So, to keep the information about a person, you might consider that you will need certain variables like name, address, age, and you might write some functions for accepting and then displaying it. However, writing these individual variables, it may work, but what if I want to keep the information about 10 people? Then having 10 name variable, 10 address variable looks a bit of weird. So is there any way, is there any methodology how we can combine the logically related data together? In C# or other programming language, class is a mechanism where you can combine logically related data together. So my name, address, age, everything, I can put it into a class. And once I put it in a class, then we can create the different variables of that person, and one variable of the person can store the information about one person. If you want to keep the information about 10 people, I can create the 10 such variables. Let me give you a brief idea what exactly I'm talking about. So, in order to create a class person, it will look something like this. We can make a class person. The class is a keyword and then we have person. Now inside this, I want to have the data members. Maybe I want to keep name. So it could be string name. If you want to keep the address, it will be string address. And age, if it is integer number of years, then it can be age. If you want some more data to be included, you can put it over here. And this way, you can get started with some absolutely basic class person. Now, if you want to keep the information about the first person, to keep the information about the first person, what I can do is I can of course go to the main method, and inside main method, I can create the object of the person. Something like this, person P1 is equal to new person. Do you recall the CLS common language specification rule that every .NET compatible language must create the object using new? Here new is used to create the object of that particular given type on the heap. So P1 is equal to new person. What exactly is happening in this situation? Assuming that this particular code is written inside main, the P1 happens to be the local variable. And since it is a local variable, it will be created on the stack. We discuss about something called as a stack-based execution. So here I consider a stack and maybe one heap. So in this particular situation, we are talking about the P1. And we said that the person is going to be a class. It is going to be the reference type. Means the P1 is not going to store the actual name, address, and age of a person. Rather, it is going to keep some address. And that address will point to the actual person object. And this person object created using new, and that object will be created on the heap. At some location, let us consider that the address is 1000. The P1 being a reference type, it is storing the reference or address of the actual object. And what this person object is storing, logically, this person object is storing the name. And by default, if I have not done any kind of initialization, you can consider that name will be empty, in fact null name. The address by default will be kind of null, and we can also have an age. If we have not done any sort of initialization, then by default this age will be 0. So the default initialization of the value type will be 0 or 0.0 for double, or false for a boolean kind of value. And string being object itself, by default it will be null. But later on, I can try to initialize all these values one by one. Like I can write p1 dot name is equal to, maybe I call it as, let's say, James Bond. Or p1 dot address, I can say, let's say, London. And possibly I want to keep the age is equal to something. Now all these related information, we have kept it inside person, and these members of the class, name, address, and age, they are accessed using dot operator. Now you will find that this is where the information name will be stored as kind of James Bond. You can complete this. And the address is stored as, let's say, London. And age, we are considering, let's say, 65 stored over here. So when we created one person, the object is created in memory like this. Of course, we can proceed further and we can think of creating another person, new person, and we can continue initializing it on the similar manner. But in this particular case, what will happen? Again, person is a reference type. So in this case also, the P2 is a reference, and what it is storing is 2000, where 2000 is considered to be the address of the new person object. Something like this. Let's say this is 2000 stored over here, and inside this, once again, we can consider it is storing name, address, and age with the default values, and which you can modify it later. I guess this gives a clarity. In this particular case, as and when we needed to keep the information about another person, every time we are creating a new object of the person. Please note that we can have n number of objects of the same class, but all of them, they will be structurally same. So each one will have the name, each one will have the address, each one will have the age. So in a way, we can say that the class is a blueprint for the object. An object itself is an instance of class. In the classic OOP example, when you want to create some house, you need to first prepare the blueprint of that. Though the blueprint is not the actual house, but this blueprint gives you guarantee how exactly the house will be built. And then using the same blueprint, you might create house 1, house 2, house 3, house 4, and so on and so forth. Exactly same concept is applied to this class and object. So class is a data type. You can say that class is a user-defined data type where you can decide what exactly you need inside the class. And then the object is going to be the instance of that class. The class is a logical entity. It doesn't need any memory. It is only telling the structure of the object. But the actual object is allocated in the heap into the memory. It will be having certain address for that. So object is always physical entity representing some real world entity. Like in this particular case, we have 2 person representing 2 person in the real world. Great. I hope you have got enough of idea. But then I want to introduce something special to you. The class is not only about putting your related data together. In fact, you need certain operations to be done. As we said that we might want to accept some information from the user for a person, or we want to display the information. Now this accept and display, these are the operations related to the person. So where exactly you will write? The class concept allows you to write the related operations inside the same class. So you can go to the class, and inside this particular class, you can put the information into you can put operation like display, and inside display, you can write the logic for displaying it. Or if you want to accept it, then you can write the logic accept. Or you want some additional functionality, maybe you want to ask whether the person can vote or cannot vote. So that kind of method, that kind of information, if you want to put in, you can have the additional function written inside that particular class. So the class is not limited only to put the data together. Rather, this class is combination of your data, which is also called as fields, and operations, which is also referred as methods. So class is a collection of data and functions. It is a user defined data type. And from that class, we can create the object. By the way, if at all you have this kind of methods, how you can call them? I guess calling is as similar as of accessing the data. So I can simply go ahead and write p1 dot display. Since it is a member of the class, it can be still accessed by using dot operator. On the similar line, if you want to access it for p2, I might say p2 dot accept, and I can say p2 dot display. That's wonderful. So syntactically, you find the class and object, the basic syntax looks quite simple, quite straightforward. Now, there is one small gotcha you can say. By default, all these class members are designed to be accessible only inside the class. Meaning by whatever members I have declared, name, address, age, display, accept, though I have written a code below like this, p1.name is equal to like this is never going to work because the compiler is going to throw me the error saying that name is inaccessible due to its visibility. Because by default, all these members are considered as private to that class. They are private to that class. They are not accessible outside the class. If you want certain members to be accessible outside the class, then those members should be declared as public. So you can declare the name as public, address as public, age as public, and going ahead, you can put display as public and accept as public, and so on and so forth. Public members are accessible inside the class as well as outside the class. We will come to the concept of data security after we've seen the basic data and basic methods in the class. So now you have got a bit of understanding. It's time that we will go to the Visual Studio, we will type this, we will execute this, get some clarity, and then we will move further and we will talk about the public-private discussion at the next level. So let me go to the Visual Studio. We already created the solution. Now inside the solution, I can say add new project. And I'm creating now .NET Core application which can work on multiple platforms. Let me click on next. And then I can write some name, let's say class and objects. I can click on next. We are still using .NET 10 and I'm not using any top level statements. So let me click on create. Great. Now the question is, how do I create a class person? Now there are two ways. Number one, I can right click on this and then I can say add new item. Add new item, I can select the class and inside this I can mention I want to go for the person class. In fact, this is the most correct and authentic way to create a class. Every time you want to create a new class, it is suggested that you add a new C# file and in that file you write the class. You keep it modular. However, for sake of simplicity, I am going to avoid creating the separate file. Let me simply go there and delete it. So I want to delete this file permanently. Then I can create the multiple classes in the same C# file. I can simply declare class person. Great. And inside this, I can start declaring string name, public string address, public int age. And as I was saying, you can also write the method, let's say a display method to get started with. Inside this display method, I want to write the display. Now this display, I can use the method, let's say name, and I will use placeholder, then address, another placeholder, and then age, one more placeholder. And here I can directly access this name, address, and age. Let us go ahead. I want to create the first object. So person E1 is equal to new person. And if you want, you can think of displaying that person as well. Here we can say right click, add, or here we can click on set as starter project and then Control F5 to run this. By default, as I said that there is no name, no address. Both the strings are by default null and age is initialized to 0. But if you want to initialize it, let me write it. P1 dot name is equal to, let's say, and then I want to write address is equal to, and then we have the age is equal to something. Now, if I'm running this, you will see that the data is displayed over here. I guess that is fantastic. This gave us exactly the output that we were looking for. Now, I also want to add one more method, and then I want to explain one more concept relevant over here. The something that I want to show over here is, let's say, accept method, where I want to accept the details from the user. The way console.writeLine can be used to display something on console, console.readLine can be used to read the data from the console. How we can do that? Let me ask user that please enter name. And then I want to take a name like this. Name is equal to console.readLine. And on the similar line, we can again ask for enter address, and we can have address is equal to console.readLine. However, you must have noted readLine is going to return me a string. The string I assign to the string variable name. It was very easy. Unfortunately, I don't have any method with the which is returning me integer. So there is nothing like console.read integer, correct? So I want to read line, and this line will return me a string. Maybe I consider the string age over here. And then this age string, I want to convert it into the integer. Well, C# has got one built-in class called as a convert, and using that class, I can say that to int32. So convert class to int32 directly we are calling it is something called as a static method of the class. And inside this, I can pass this age as a string. To int32 is going to convert it to the integer. And then that integer, I can assign it to my age data, my age field over here. Great. And this is how we can write the accept method. Technically, there is one small problem with this. What is the basic problem with this? If you have noted, we have declared the data member with the name age, and we have written another local variable with exactly same name. And that is the reason the compiler is giving me the error. Over here, the compiler is not considering my data member. It is just considering my local variable, which is of a string type. Now, this could be a problem when we are writing the different methods. You might want some arguments having the same name as of data member name, or you might want some local variable whose name is matching with the data member name. Well, how you can access that? That itself is a question. For time being, let me just complete this by changing the name of this particular variable, run this, and then we will try to solve this problem. Let me quickly have a look at person p2 is equal to new person. I can say accept, and after that we can say p2 dot display. Let's check whether it is working well. So you can enter the name. Maybe I'm entering the name, let's say Superman. Address, I might put, let's say Krypton. And you might ask you for an age. Let's say for the age, I'm putting some age over here, and that information, it is scanned, put it into the object data, and then it is displayed back. Over here, it didn't ask for enter age because possibly we have missed that. Okay, we can add that line here. Let's say enter age. Not a problem. But well, we were discussing about our problem. What will happen if I just want to keep the exactly same name? And yes, it is giving me the error. So how we can remove this error gracefully? Now, to solve that error, you need to first understand the basic idea, how exactly the methods of any object are invoked. So when I say p1.display and when I say p2.display, how exactly it is working? How exactly p1.display is able to display the data of the p1 and p2.display is able to display the data of the p2 only. Why? There is no confusion. Let me try to explain you this. Please pay attention. What I was saying is that when we are creating the object, so p1 is a reference variable. So p1 is storing the address 1000. And the actual person where we have stored that James Bond information is stored at the different location in the heap. This is nothing but my actual person object, right? As I said that this one is keeping the information about the James Bond and other information. When we say P2 person and then we accepted that information, we are talking about P2, and then we have over here, let's say address 2000. This 2000 address, it is pointing to the memory location 2000, which is another person object. And inside that, it is keeping the information about Superman that we input from the console. Well, this is fine. Now, the question is, try to understand. Now, in this particular case, how exactly our P1's display is working and P2's display is working. So whenever we are making call to the member function or the method of the class, internally, the object, the current object address is passed to that particular method implicitly. So whenever you are making call to the p1.display, the p1's address, that is 1000, is internally passed to the display. And in display, it is collected into one implicit argument. We are not writing it specifically. It is an implicit argument, and that implicit argument is this. The name of the argument is this. This itself is a keyword, which is going to hold that 1000. Since it is holding 1000, you will see that it will point to the same object, and then inside this you will be, whatever access you are doing, name, address, and age, it is internally considered as this dot name. It is considered as this dot address. It is considered as this dot age. So this is pointing to the current object, and then its name, its address, and its age is accessed over here. This concept is exactly same as of C++ this pointer or Java's this reference. So if you at all come from the other OOP background, you can relate it 100%. If not, I just explained you how it worked. Let me talk about the second example where we called p2.display. Here you see that the p2 is another reference and it is pointing to the another person object which is keeping some different information over here, right? When we will make a call to the p2.display, now this is a new call altogether. In that new call, the p2's address is internally passed to the display. And at this point of time, this is under implicit argument. Please note, I'm considering this as an argument to the method. As you are aware, the method argument scope is always for the current execution. So at the second execution, this is not storing 1000, rather it will store 2000. And then the same access, this dot name, this dot address, this dot age, you will realize that this is going to refer to the address 2000. Great. So this dot name will actually now refer to the Superman. This dot address will refer to the Krypton. This dot age will refer to the Superman's age. And of course, moment the method is completed, this keyword is lost. It is an argument get automatically destroyed. So whenever we are writing the code inside a method and we want to access the fields, the data member, it is always a great practice that instead of writing only the data member name, you should be writing this dot data member name. This makes your code more readable, more understandable, that now you are trying to access the class fields, not the local variables or not the parameters, right? So let me go and modify my code a little bit. I will just try to put this dot name, this dot address, and this dot age. Now, technically speaking, since this was a display kind of method, there was no other local variable or argument. So writing this is optional. Good practice is that better you write it. But inside accept, now you must have understood how we can solve this problem. Here, when I talk about name, I'm talking about this dot name. When I'm talking about address, I'm talking about this dot address, that is my data member. And when I want to assign age, this age can be a local variable, no problem. And after conversion, I want to assign it to my data member age. That's great. Now you can have another local variable or argument in the same method with the exactly same name, and there is no problem. Now this is a situation where writing this keyword becomes mandatory. If you ask me personally, I strongly recommend that whether there is name conflict or not, it is always good standard practice that moment you are inside the method, always prefer accessing your fields using this dot. Now let us run it once again and cross check. Yes, we can add Superman. We can put his address. We can put some age. And that is going wonderful. Just now, you understood two things. One thing that you understood is how to declare the data and how to have operations in the same class. We also seen the P1 and P2. These are the objects of the class, and we can then create multiple objects in the class as and when required. Now let us go ahead. The next important thing that can be problematic, as we are working in the team, being a team person, you might be given a work that writing a class, and some of your colleague might be consuming your class, using your class. This is the common situation how we work in the IT industry and typical object-oriented developer. So some developer is implementing the classes while some other developer is consuming those classes. Now, what if you have written a class with some thoughts in your mind, and some of your colleague who want to use the code not understood it well and misuse that? Meaning by, for example, instead of storing, let's say, age is equal to 65, that is fine, it is quite valid. What if he consider the age is equal to -5? Does age is equal to -5 anyway make sense over here? Answer is no. But such kind of mistakes are possible, and if your programming logic is very, very complex, at that time you might see that due to the wrong values assigned by your teammate, you might get entirely wrong output there. Yeah, this is the main trouble. So how do you ensure that not the wrong values are set inside your object fields? To be frank, by the time your fields are public, they are directly accessible outside the class. And if they are directly accessible outside the class, then any of your colleague may access it whichever way that they want, which can be the correct use, which can be the misuse as well. If you do not want that data to be set with the wrong value, then it is most common that you never expose the data outside the class directly. And how you can do that? I guess I was talking about you can mark your data as private. In fact, in C#, if I'm not writing anything, by default, all my data is considered as private inside the class. And you see the error that you cannot access name due to its protection level. The default protection level over here is private. I'll do one thing. I will always write the private explicitly in order to make it more readable. And now my colleague is not able to access these values directly. But then next question, how he will be able to set the values with his own choice? If he want to set the values with his own choice, then I need to facilitate him with providing some extra methods in my class. The extra methods in my class, maybe I can write some method public void set name, and then I can pass some name over here, and this name I can assign. Oh, this name is the argument I want to assign to this name, which is a field. Now, since the names are same, you might do it in a wrong way. To make it more readable, just now we discussed to access the data member, we can use this keyword. So we can say this dot name is equal to name. And on the similar line, we can have this dot set address, and we can set the address. And on the similar line, we can try to set the age, and it will go like this. So in this particular case, you are providing the methods so that your colleague can set the values over here. How it will be done? Like set name, and you can pass the James Bond, set address, and you're putting it London. And going ahead, you can have set age. For time being, let me comment this P2 and check if this is going to work well. Let me run this. Wow, I'm able to do exactly same thing with this. But don't you think that now the user who was earlier assigning -5 to that P1 age can also pass the -5 to the set age method? Yes, this is quite possible. But in that particular case, what I suggest is, let us run this. And you see that this is unexpected. But now you have the control over it. What kind of control? Before initializing value, you can have double check. You can verify that if age is greater than 0, greater than equal to or greater than 0, and age may be less than 100, then and only then I want to assign it. Otherwise, I might want to print some sort of a message, or I might want to raise some sort of error that you are passing the invalid age. This can be done over here. Now in this particular case, you will check that the age is not set over here, and you can see the message invalid age right there. So instead of we giving direct access of our data to our colleagues who are creating the object who is going to consume our class, we made it private and we put a wrapper of some public functions on that. By the way, my display method is displaying all these contents, but this display method is displaying everything in a single line. Now my colleague might want to print this particular value into some web page or into some window where this display method of the console is of no use. So how I can provide him access to that? If I feel that certain data members are worth providing access, then I can write something similar method like get name. And then I can return this name from the method. On the similar line, we can have the method public string get address. And then this get address, we will return this dot address. Going ahead, we want to write the method for get age. And now we have 3 methods ready. We have written 3 setter methods, and then we have written 3 getter methods. Now user means my programmer user, my teammate, have option. Either he can say p1.display directly, which will display the information, or if you want to display it in some different fashion, then he might choose like p1.name is equal to the value p1.getName. So I can have p1.getName, something like this. And maybe you can go onto the new line where you see that p1's address is equal to maybe p1.getAddress. And then again I want to print p1's age. So p1 age is equal to p1.getAge. So instead of printing all that information on a single line, my colleague want to print it on multiple different lines. And yes, this is going perfectly as per his requirement. Here, the kind of methods that we have written so far in the class. We have written 3 getter methods. We have written 3 setter methods. And along with that, we have written 2 methods accept and display. What exactly I can call them as? Let me do this categorization. You see that whatever I have written in the class These are referred as data members, or these are called as the fields. These are the extra facilities provided in my class. You may write n number of extra facilities. As I said that you might write a method, maybe whether the person can vote or not, depending on his age. So that can be additional facility you want to provide. This facility is referred as something called as a facilitators. And then we have over here setter methods. The setter methods who are responsible for modifying the fields, which is also referred as modifying the state of the objects. That is called as a mutators. These are called as a mutators. What mutators do? Mutators are simple language. It is a setter methods, and these setter methods are to modify the state of the object. That is nothing but values of the data members you can modify over here. And then we have the next, we have written these getter methods. These getter methods are referred as something called as inspectors, called as getter methods. What this getter method do? Getter method only read the state of the object or read the values of the data members. Nothing else that they do. Please note the primary purpose of writing these mutators and inspectors, writing these getters and setters, is to provide the controlled access to the data of the class. As we have declared our data is private, no one will be able to access this data directly outside the class. If you want to make it accessible properly as per the requirement defined by the class author, the class writer, the class developer, then he can decide which data members should be given access. Which getters and setters that I want to write, I will write only those. It is not compulsory that each and every data member you must write getter and setter. Whatever, being a class developer, I feel logical that these members should be accessible outside the class in controlled manner. I will write the getter and setter. The next thing, while setting the values as well, now no colleague can save the value directly, whichever value that you want. We can have the additional validity checks. So we will validate the value whether the age is positive or not. Because if the age is negative, I do not want it to be set to my object inside that age. This will be taken care. This is exactly people know as something called as a data security. This data security is one of the important question that people come across, and one of the special reason why this OOP designed, but a lot of people take it in a wrong way. Many times I heard that people talk about the data security is trying to secure your data from the end user. But you ever ask the question to yourself, is any end user is ever understanding whether we have written any classes or what data members that we are declaring? Is my end user who is just clicking here and there to access your software or typing something, how he will be able to modify your data in the wrong way? Please note, the data security feature is not designed to protect your object state against the end user. Rather, it is primarily designed so that your colleagues, your teammates who are going to consume the class written by you is not modifying it in unexpected way, in the wrong way. And that is taken care over here. Now that you have understood the data security, we can go a step ahead. And though writing these kind of getters and setters and everything, they are doing fantastic job. Unfortunately, these getter setters are not considered to be very readable way. What is the problem with this? The primary problem is that these are kind of method like syntaxes. And these method like syntaxes are available into C++, Java and all languages. But don't you think that this can be made more readable instead of writing code like this? If I could write the code like this, p1 dot name is equal to James Bond. Don't you think that this is more readable? Then you say that, should we make it public? No, don't make it public, because making it public you will lose the data security at all. But I want to provide the controlled access. I want to provide the getter and setter, but I want to keep my syntax the readable like it was earlier. And this is where the C# brought a new concept to you. And that new concept that C# brought is called as properties. How do you write the properties? The property is nothing but just a smart way of writing getters and setters. So I can say public, your return type is string. I want to make it name as a name of that property. Purposefully, I have kept in capital. And inside this, I can write the get part. The get part where you will write exactly same logic that you had written it into the getter part. Good. And then you can have the similar one, the set part also you can implement inside the same, let's say set, and you can write this dot name is equal to value. Please note over here, there are no specific arguments written over here. There is no concept of writing explicit argument. Rather, the argument of the setter is always considered to be the value. The value itself acts as a keyword into the setter part. So whatever value is assigned, that value will be appearing over here as a value keyword. So James Bond will come into the value and then it will be assigned this dot name. That's it. Simple and straight. It is as easy you can write the code. And then on the similar line, you can have public string address. So you can again have the getter method and you can go for the setter method. Maybe I can say that this dot address is equal to value. Great. And likewise, you can also go for public int age. You recall earlier we have written the setter method and we provided certain checks over there. Yes, absolutely same way the checks can be provided inside this setter block. And in this setter block, I can write if age is greater than 0 and age is less than 100, then and only then you assign. Otherwise, you can print the same old message. Let's say invalid age over here. Correct? However, this particular value that you are getting is input that you want to check against, and that is something done as a value keyword. The value over here is implicit argument for the setter. Value over here is implicit argument for the setter. And that makes your code too readable. Means instead of set name, set address, set age, I will continue p1 dot address is equal to London. And then p1 dot address age is equal to maybe 65. While accessing the values as well, I can continue console.writeLine and you can print these values one by one like p1 dot name, or you want to print, let's say p1 address. A p1 address, it is p1 dot address. plus let me print P1's age over here, P1 dot age. Please note, whenever you are using the property on the left hand side of the assignment operator, it is automatically making call to the setter block, automatically making call to the setter block, automatically making call to the setter block. While you are using it on the right side of the assignment operator, it will internally make a call to the getter block. So in this particular case, it will be calling the getter. So you can use your properties, the getter setter kind of method logic, just like a field. It is providing you the controlled access. And further, it is not compulsory that you have to write the getter and setter for each method, each property. You might have some methods which are setter only. You might have certain properties which are getter only. You have, being a programmer, you have full freedom to choose which getter or setter or both should be written inside a property. I hope that is interesting and that is useful feature. Let me run this and check whether this is still working well. Wow, that's wonderful. And I will have that check once again. What if the wrong value you are trying to set over here? Will it work? Answer is no, it will not work. You will still get that message invalid age. People also ask the question, is there any way that we can confirm the execution of these properties? Well, if you want to understand the actual execution of these properties, you should be knowing debugging feature. And the debugging feature, for that, you can do one thing. You can set up breakpoint. How do you set the breakpoint over here? So to set the breakpoint, I'll just tell you a quick shortcut key that you can go to the line which you want to check and you can press F9. F9 is to toggle the breakpoint. If the breakpoint is already there, you press F9, it will be removed. So F9, maybe I'm setting the breakpoint for this. If you want to set the breakpoint for each getter and setter, yes, you can do that as well, right? And then once you have done that, let us get started. If you want to start debugging right from the first, you can even set the breakpoint over here. And your debugging will start with the F5. Good. And then you can run it step by step. To check how do you run it step by step, there are options given. So you will find that there's a F11 if you want to go inside a method to check what is happening over there, or step over where you just want to execute the method but not going inside the method, right? I will usually prefer using F10. So F10, so P1 is created, and you will see that the P1 which is created, it is having the default value null, null, and 0. Now, when I say P1 dot name is equal to something, I'm assigning, and when you are assigning, the setter block is called. Let me press F10 and you see that, oh, it has internally called the setter and it is showing me that value is James Bond. Let it be assigned and then I can go back. On the similar line, here the set address will work, and once that address London is set, we can give a try to the age. Now the 65 is well in a range from 0 to 100. So this dot age is equal to 100 is done. And then it is display method. If you want to go inside the display method, we have not set the breakpoint, but if you want to go inside the method, you can press F11 explicitly. F11 explicitly, and then you will be able to see this output on the console. Good. Then I'm continuing with F10. And now in this particular case, where you are accessing P1 name, address, age, for reading purpose, as a getter purpose, let me say F10, and you will see that first it will go to the get name, getter block from the name property. James Bond is returned from this. And then it will go to the address part, which will return the address London from here. And again, going inside this, it will return the age is 65. And then F10, you will see exactly similar output onto the console. I hope this gave you the clarity about how exactly the execution of the properties are done. So in C++, Java kind of language, it is very common that people use the getter and setter as a methods. But in C#, instead of writing getter and setter methods, we always prefer writing the properties. And then one more very interesting part I have. One more very interesting part that we have, definitely you should be using getter setter to provide the controlled access, correct? And with that controlled access, you get a freedom to choose that which value you want to set inside your data member, where you are putting some validation check. Yes, that is also good enough. However, most of the time, the properties that we write as a developer are very basic level properties, only one-liner property, where we are only returning a value or we are only assigning a value. We are not doing any validation checks over there. So if at all you are looking for not doing any kind of checks or something like that, then don't you think it is too much to write one data member and then writing some 2-3 lines of code for writing getter and setter? So this is the problem understood and handled by the C# 3.0. So in .NET Framework 3, what these people did, these people say that if you want the properties with very basic minimal getter and setter, single liner, with no validation check, then we have a concept called as auto-implemented properties or implicit properties. Now these auto-implemented properties or implicit properties is something like this, where being a programmer, I do not declare data member. I directly start writing something, let's say string, maybe mobile. Mobile is my property. And inside this, I will write the getter part empty and setter part empty. What is this? This is called as auto implemented properties. And this auto implemented properties, as I said, that this is part of .NET Framework 3.0 and onwards. What this framework, what this particular concept is doing behind the scene, internally, C# compiler adds a field, hidden field, of course. Field means data member into the class. And not only it is putting the field plus writing basic property. Basic property means one-liner, no validation check. Basic property with maybe the get block and the set block. If you want, you may write only the get so that no set block is generated. If you want, you can have only the set and no get block generated. But typically, you write get semicolon, set semicolon, so which is talking about the default implementation. Do we have any proof for this? The proof is visible into the ILDASM. I guess we discussed about the ILDASM earlier. So whatever DLL is created, if we open that DLL inside ILDASM, we will see that there is one hidden data member created, and plus the property is nothing but writing the getter as well as setter internally. Being a programmer, I need not to write that getter setter explicitly. Well, you can give a try on this. Let's say p1.mobile and you can assign some mobile number over here. I'm just putting some random value. Good. So will this value be displayed? Yes, if you want, you can display that value explicitly. Let's say P1's mobile. I have P1.mobile. This particular one will call the setter of that auto implemented property, and this one will call maybe getter of that auto implemented property. And you can run this and you can check that. Oh, this information is displayed very well over here. So if you just want to declare some data members with the default single line of properties, then auto implemented properties is a fantastic feature. And you will see that many of the upcoming demos, we will be using these auto implemented properties very heavily. We will see ILDASM once. Let us get it clear for all. Like developer PowerShell or developer command prompt I can open. And inside this, we can use ILDASM. But before that, let me go to that directory. Inside directory, we have the bin folder and then we have debug folder. You know that there is net 10.0 and then we have our DLL where actual code is kept. Now I can use ILDASM. And inside this, I want to give, let's say, class objects.dll. Now you can take a look at, yes, we have this class, and inside this, do you see that the getter, setter, methods, they are written automatically behind the scene. Not only that, you can even check the mobile, the backing field, the hidden field is created over here. And for that, we have get mobile and set mobile also written over here. I'm sure this confirms writing properties is just a smart way to write get and set method in order to make your code more readable. When I say your code, I'm talking about the code of the consumer of your class. Your teammates who are using your class, they will find it in more readable. Now that you have understood all these things, it's time to talk about the next type of method inside the class. And the next type of method inside the class should be the about initialization. Now you have noted that when I wrote the P1 is equal to new person, internally the object of the person is created. But by default, it was having the default values. What if I do not want to have the default values there? Instead, I want to assign some values to the data members whenever the object is created. Is it any way possible? Answer is yes. Let us go ahead. And for that, like C++, like Java, there is a concept called as a constructor. So person, constructor. The syntax of writing constructor is the constructor method will always have the same name as of class name. And here we are talking about parameterless constructor, the constructor which is not taking any argument. Inside this method, I can assign some default value for the name. Maybe I want to name it as anonymous. I want to put that address as unknown. Maybe I want to set the age by default is equal to 1. And if you want, yes, you can even assign the mobile number is, let's say, empty. Now, let us go ahead and try to run this particular application. Have you noted that? We have just created object, but earlier we were getting it empty. Now it is filled with the values we set over here. What is this? This is nothing but called as a constructor. This is constructor. Constructor is the special member function of your class, which is automatically called when the object of the class is created. So every time you create the object of the class, then constructor will be called. You can cross check it by setting one breakpoint over here. So let me set the breakpoint over here. I can even put one breakpoint over here, and then I'm pressing F5. Now, when I say F10, you will see that behind the scene, it is calling the constructor that we have written, and then it is setting the object values to whatever values we have given there. And that is the reason when we say display, the display is displaying the values given by us. Since display, we have not displayed the mobile, so mobile value is not displayed, but anyway, that mobile is stored inside this, right? So this is taken care. What exactly happened when I was not writing a constructor? When you were not writing a constructor, one constructor was provided to you by default by the C# compiler. So C# compiler provides a default constructor for you. And that is the reason that default constructor is initializing your data members with the default values like 0 or 0.0 or like null. Now that things are clear, what if I want to pass some specific values while initializing the object instead of this anonymous or let's say or the unknown or empty? Yes, we can do one thing that can be done into the new. So when I create an object person P3 is equal to new person, I might consider passing the values. So what sort of values? Maybe I'm passing the name of the person. Maybe I want to pass the address over here. Maybe I want to pass the age, and you can think of passing some mobile number as well. And in this particular case, I'm looking for a constructor which is taking 4 arguments. Is it allowed? Yes, very much. So we can write another constructor which is taking 4 values. One is name, another is name, another is address, another is age, and finally we have mobile. And inside this, we can initialize the name, we can initialize the address, we can initialize the age, and we can initialize the mobile. While doing this initialization, yes, we can directly initialize it into the fields, or we can initialize it into the property. Again, if you ask me, the good practice, if you have already written properties, I personally recommend that better you use the properties over here, so that if any kind of validation logic is written inside setter block, that validation logic will get executed even while constructing the object itself. And whatever values that you have passed over here, those values will be used to create the object. Of course, we can check p3.display, and with the p3.display, you will have some result. Oh, that's great. So just now I talked about there are 2 types of constructors I can write. One is parameterless constructor, and this one, the another one, this is also the constructor with some values. It is a parameterized constructor. Again, the basic syntax of the constructor is same. The name of the constructor is always same as the name of the class. Arguments, depending on your requirement, it could be parameterless, it could be parameterized, and you can also have the multiple parameterized constructor with the different arguments over here. You can do the initialization job because constructor is always called immediately after creation of the object. And very important thing to note is there is no return type for the constructor value. So we only write the constructor and there is no return type given over there. That's great. So in constructor, we can initialize the default values, or in constructor, we may also allocate some resources. When I say resources, I'm talking about the external resources like files or database connections or something like that. So if you want, you might consider, let's say, opening a file into this. And once your job is done, ideally, you should be closing the file. Now, as far as the memory allocation part is concerned, the .NET CLR is sorted out, because whenever the memory is allocated and that object goes unreferenced later, we talked about garbage collector. The garbage collector will come into picture and it will automatically deallocate the object. So it is not a big deal as far as memory part is concerned. But what if you are opening a file, or what if you have some sort of a database connection open? Don't you think that after your person object is completed its job, when your person object is going to be destroyed, this file or this database connection need to be closed explicitly? Yes, it should be. But if constructor can do the initialization, do we have something which can do the de-initialization? Yes, de-initialization is exactly the reverse process, exactly the complement of the constructor. And in fact, the syntax itself is using a complement. The syntax itself is using complement, the tilde operator, which is indicating that this is reverse of a constructor, and that is called as a destructor. If you come across C++ language, in C++ language also, we have a concept of a destructor. And the destructor's job is to de-initialize the object. What this destructor is de-initializing object? As I said that there is no way in C# that we delete an object. There is no memory releasing part. But if you have opened a file or if you have opened a database connection, then you might want to close that file explicitly. And a safe way is you can go for a destructor. So here we see the function constructor, which is doing initialize the object to default values. In this particular case, the constructor is initializing the object to given values, and the destructor is one who is going to de-initialize the object. However, I just want to make one idea clear. The destructor over here, since the person is going to be destroyed by the garbage collector later, whenever garbage collector will try to destroy that P1, P2 object, at that time, garbage collector is expected to call this method. We never call destructor explicitly. It will be called by the garbage collector when garbage collector come into picture. And for today, I want to tell you one thing, that garbage collector only come into picture when there is a huge memory usage. When there is a huge memory usage, when there are too many unreferenced objects, at that time garbage collector come into picture, and then garbage collector delete those objects. Before deleting the object, it will call the destructors, or which are also called as the finalizers, into from your class. However, this is not happening for such a small application where we are creating only 1 or 2% object. So if we run this full application, there are likely chances are that the destructor is never called. So the destructor may not be considered as a very clean and reliable method of releasing the resources. There is a better option which we will discuss later. There is a concept called as the iDisposable interface. We will discuss about that after few more classes. But for time being, I just wanted to tell you that what kind of methods we can write inside a class. Yes, we can write the constructors, one or more. We can write the destructor. We can write the facilitators. We can write the traditional getter setters, but if you are in C#, better you avoid that and you write the smart getter setters, which are nothing but the properties. And these properties can also be something called as a auto-implemented properties. I guess that's wonderful. Now, before we winding up this particular session, as you have already understood the initialization part, you already talked about how the constructor can be used for initialization. And now that you have already written the properties, let me tell you one more method how you can do the initialization. That one more method that I can use it for initialization is nothing but called as a object initializer, which will internally use your constructor, which will internally use constructor plus it will use your properties for sake of initialization. What exactly it is? Let me show you. Let's say I want to create a person P4 where I want to say person, but I want to initialize maybe only two values, only the name and the age. As you have seen, I have written a constructor, but the constructor is taking 4 arguments. I'm just right now interested in initializing only the two values. How I can go for it? So I will use new person and then I can use curly bracket. And inside curly bracket, I can mention that name is equal to something. And then I can mention age is equal to something. That's it. And then you can say p4.display. By the way, I can run this. You can check. Yes, this Iron Man, it is working very well. What exactly happened behind the scene? Let me explain you what exactly happened behind the scene by setting up the breakpoints once again. So let me set the breakpoint for name setter and for address setter and maybe for the age setter. I'll just remove that address setter, not needed. Done. And we can also take a look at the constructor. Let me set the breakpoint for this as well. Let me comment out remaining all person objects so that we can focus on this P4 Iron Man only. Also, let me comment the destructor over here. I do not need the destructor for time being. So my destructor is also commented. And then we can say F5. Great. Now we have written one constructor as well as we have written the property initializer over here. When I say F11, it will first make a call to the constructor. And into the constructor, whatever default values are given, they are initialized. And after that, when we have said name is equal to something, age is equal to something, we already set the breakpoint. So you can see that corresponding setter name is called and then setter age is called. And after that, my initialization is completed. Then you can go to the display method and inside display method, we can display the full information. Please note that this address unknown was initialized by the parameterless constructor. So this might be making your job a bit simpler because you now need not to write too many constructors for every possible combination. You can just have one parameterless constructor, and with parameterless constructor, you can use the properties for initializing the remaining values. I hope this is another interesting feature. This object initialization is not limited to only the class objects. As we will go ahead, you will see that this particular feature can be used for the array initialization, and for that sake, it can be also used for the collection initializers. So today we talked about so many things about the C# classes. The primarily we discuss about what exactly the class and object is. We understood that the class is user-defined data type. The class is blueprint of the object. The class allows you to combine data and related operations together. The class is a logical entity. It defines the structure and behavior, but it doesn't occupy any memory. And since it is a data type, reference type, we can create the object of the class explicitly by using new operator. And we can create one or more instances of one particular class. The object is going to occupy the memory. The object is a physical entity and it is holding the data in its data members. Each object will have some state values of the data member. Each object will have some behavior that is nothing but the functionality written inside the class. The display behavior is to display the data. And then identity is a unique address, uniqueness of your object. Every object will have the unique address in the memory. We talked about how we can write the different facilitators. We can write constructor, we can write destructor, we can write the traditional getter setters, or we can also write the properties. In my opinion, another most important concept that I explained you today was data security, where you understood the exact meaning of the data security, that it is securing your data against the mistakes done by your colleague, maybe wrong values set up in your data members, correct? And one small keyword that we come across was the this keyword, which is similar to the other OOP languages. I hope this long session, but this will build the right foundation for learning the rest of the C#. So see you in the next class with more exciting features of C#. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.